Hey guys, I was actually planning to do a Sandwraith guide today, but in light of the new patch coming soon featuring a huge buff to Sandwraith, I'm actually going to hold out for a week. So today, why don't we take a nice quick look at warding? Thankfully, more and more people are seeing the light and buying wards, even in pub games. I think what really made it happen was that people started realizing that having sight over the tablets really makes a huge difference when you're solo mid with a bottle. But really, that's just the start of where wards come in handy in HoN. Being able to know where tablets are is great, but wards can do so much more than that. With the right placement and the right presence of mind, you can avoid over 50% of any incoming ganks, especially early on during the laning phase. Generally, when warding early on, you're going to be doing two things: getting sight of those tablets and blocking neutral creeps from spawning. Usually when you're starting out, only one person will buy one set of wards, meaning you will do both of these things unless you're keeping your second ward for tablets later. This spot is pretty standard for warding the top river. For Hellborn, this spot is good because in addition to covering the tablet and the river, it also covers this pathway, giving you sight over 2 out of 3 routes that Legion can take to gank your middle lane. For Legion, the same logic applies in the opposite sense, that Hellborn mid will have a harder time ganking your top. If you're playing as Legion, you can also put this ward a little to the right of the ledge to prevent this neutral creep from spawning, a handy little trick if your enemy has somebody trying to jungle there. Bottom, things are pretty straightforward early game. This ward spot here gives you vision of all 3 ways that the middle lane could come to gank your bottom lane regardless of what team you're on, and also provides you with sight of the tablet. Later in the game, when sight of Kongor becomes more important, this ward here will provide you with a better sight outside of Kongor's area, runes, and some paths in the Legion jungle. Another popular spot for bottom lane is this spot here. Although it provides you with no coverage of middle to bottom lane besides the river itself, it protects better against ganks within the same lane while also giving you vision of the tablet. When warding neutrals, you want to make the most of your ward. Obviously, you want to ward up the neutral spawns that are near the lane that the enemy can pull into their creeps. When warding, do not just cram your ward deep into the neutral spawn. The radius where you can put the ward is actually surprisingly big, and whether or not you have vision of the creeps that you are trying to block doesn't matter. For example, by putting your ward further out on either team's neutrals, you can have some vision of the surrounding area. You can also put the ward behind the trees and it will still work and give vision of the opposite side. Another strategy that is useful if your enemy is into counter warding is to simply put the ward inside of the trees. This won't give you any bonus vision, but it will make the ward much harder to find if the enemy doesn't have a good way of chopping down trees or have a flying courier to spot it. Later in the game, ward placement becomes much more interesting, as tablets are no longer as important as they once were, and knowing where your enemy is becoming crucial. Mid-game, there's a lot of ganking going on, and wards are your #1 tool for finding lone enemy heroes, especially jungle heroes that are easily forgotten, like Zephyr, Tempest, or Legionnaire. Both the Legion and the Hellborn forest have large pillars in the forest perfect for warding. While both sides cover a huge amount of ground, the Hellborn jungle is especially good because it provides vision of 2 major neutral spawns. During mid to late game, you can pretty much ward up whatever you feel you need, depending on how you're playing, offensively or defensively. If the enemy team has a strong initiation-based team, it's important to ward your jungle and its entrances. If you're playing very offensively, especially late game, while ganking can be crucial to push, wards in your enemy's forest are extremely important. Also, as mentioned before, warding Kongor is usually a good idea late game. Don't let inexperience talk you out of warding spots that you aren't really sure about. The basic gist of late game warding is simply to get as much sight as possible on the spots where action or initiation is likely to take place. Now, on to counter warding. Counter warding is in most cases just as important as warding, and crucial if you want to have the upper hand against a skilled opponent, especially if your opponent is losing and can't really afford to counter your counter. While Bound Eye and level 3 puzzle blocks also work, the most common way of detecting wards is through Wards of Revelation. Wards of Revelation have a very low vision radius, but have a very large reveal radius that works independent of sight, or height. This means that if you place a Ward of Revelation low on the ground, wards of sight on higher platforms will still be revealed as long as you somehow have sight of them. That said, if you suspect that your enemy has wards in a general area but you aren't sure exactly where they are, try to place a Ward of Revelation in the middle of all spots that you suspect it might be. Then you can use another ward of sight or a flying courier to get vision and destroy the ward with a ranged attack.